Let's talk about support pages. The most commonly played support in League of Legends is Thresh. Thresh is a whole lot of fun. He's a great dude. He's a cool bro. And Thresh has the unfortunate circumstance of being not quite melee, but still wants to go Relic Shield. Now, it's worth pointing out that Relic Shield and Ancient Coin have a very, very close win rate. It's like less than 0.1% apart. And honestly, if you're not good at last hitting, just go Ancient Coin. Like, the win rate is 0.1% apart at Platinum or higher. So if you're below Platinum, you're generally worse at last hitting. And it further diminishes the value you're getting out of Relic Shield. So in a lot of cases, it's almost better to go for Ancient Coin. But because people commonly go for Relic Shield and they need help last hitting, attack damage marks are pretty much the best for that reason. Otherwise, armor marks are good, and attack speed marks are pretty good, because if you're ever in sort of an all-in situation, Thresh has pretty good auto attack damage. He gets bonus AD, bonus damage on hit from all the souls he picks up, which means his damage per auto is quite high. So getting more attack speed is a pretty big boost in damage. Also, in general, armor marks are really good on support in general. They're one of the most common marks to run because tank stats are good on supports. They're almost always going to be in the front line. Seals by a lot is flat health. This is very commonly the #1 seal for supports. They're not going to run scaling health as much because they don't get as many levels, so health is still the best defensive stat, so this is where they go for. As far as glyphs are concerned, highest win rate is actually flat CDR, although it is followed closely by flat MR and scaling MR. Again, Thresh is essentially melee. He needs the durability, but also his utility is boosted up by cooldown reduction, so it's kind of, do you want to get more things done, or do you want to be more durable? And then Armor Quince rounds out the page pretty cleanly as an obviously good choice. Now, Thresh should probably go 0, 12, 18. Courage of the Colossus is his best keystone by a lot. Even after the nerfs in 624, it will probably still be the best for him. And as far as skill order is concerned, Q max then W max is highest win rate by quite a bit. So get those points in your shield second. Flay can stay as a 1-point wonder. It's going to be fine without any more points. Janna, in the support role, armor, actually her highest win rate marked, because who cares? Like, yes, she can run hybrid pen, yes, she can run magic pen, yes, she can run attack damage. Not a very big deal. Health, just slightly better than MP5, which is also an option, but doesn't really need to be run. Flat CDR, actually quite good on this champion. You want to kind of budget how much cooldown reduction you're going to get, but keep in mind, supports usually end a game with under 10,000 gold, so, plan that as your general build. You shouldn't really need to plan for, 15k or a fill build. I think that's kind of irresponsible. But also flat AP, scaling MR, and flat MR aren't too bad on Janna. What's interesting actually is kind of all these choices for runes. Most of them are very close in win rate. Your actual rune choices on Janna don't seem to mean a whole lot in most cases, outside of making sure you go either flat health or MP5 in your seal slot. The rest of them are all very close together. Armor Quince, ability power Quince, move speed Quince, even gold Quince can be good on Janna, but armor had the highest win rate. She's an obvious win speakers user, 0, 18, 12. And pretty much every support that's not specifically a damage dealer, whose job is explicitly to deal a lot of damage, is 0, 18, 12 or 0, 12, 18. Pretty much without exception. Alistar, armor is the best. Hybrid pen, actually, not far behind. Alistar does do pretty reasonable damage, especially now that he's got that sweet trample E. It's quite strong, and people seem to be enjoying using it, and hybrid pen is not far behind armor as far as win rate's concerned. Flat HP, still just the best defensive seal for supports. Of course, we know the general quadrifecta or whatever, flat armor, scaling health, not terribly far behind, but generally speaking, flat health is better. Scaling MR, interestingly enough, actually his best glyph type. Flat MR, flat CDR are close behind, but that seems to be the best for him. And then as far as quints are concerned, move speed, pretty substantially his best quintessence. Armor is behind that, but pretty much by a lot. Alistar, 0, 12, 18. Courage of the Colossus, of course, pretty much by far his best option. Leona, interestingly enough, whereas Alistar's a bit more defensive and needs to be a bit tankier, Leona actually has raw armor and MR in her kit, so doesn't need armor quite as badly, can still use it, but actually precision is a very good rune on her. because she's all about getting her team to deal damage, landing spells, and landing auto attacks afterwards. And the whole point of Leona being successful is to one-shot somebody, and so increasing her damage output is pretty nice. Attack damage is close behind is pretty valuable, and we know armor is also very good rune, but Hybrid Pen technically has the highest win rate. As far as runes are concerned, in the seals, it's health or scaling health. She has no need for armor or scaling armor because she already has a bunch in her kit through her W, so it's health or scaling health. Health technically a little bit better. Flat CDR tends to be really good on her as well. More chance to all in, more chance to kill your opponents. There's even a good chance you can get your Q up a second time in a team fight, and that's pretty good. As far as Quince, much like Alistar, move speed followed closely by armor. You want to be able to get into range. Your melee, you need to land those Qs, you need to land those skills. Otherwise, barring that, yes, durability is nice to have, so you can do that a fair bit yourself. And of course, she is a Courage of the Colossus 01218 user. Nami's a bit interesting because there's a caliber of supports: Nami, Morgana, Karma, Sona, Bard, champs like this where you don't know if they're supposed to be lane bullies or just supportive, and they kind of do both. They do some damage, they grant some durability, they need to tank a little bit. And those have always been difficult for me to figure out what exactly I wanted to do with them. And the rune win rate stats actually tell a similar story, where they're all a bit similar in terms of how good they are. So it's really to kind of your taste, and you've got to kind of figure out what you think is best for the game at hand. Highest win rate mark for Nami, though, still is armor, but Hybrid Pen, even raw attack damage, and Magic Pen are close behind. Interestingly enough, scaling health ends up being her best seal. It is still very close next to flat health, MP5, and even armor. Being a self-healer, she can multiply defensive stats like armor by healing, and taking less damage per hit. But the general thought for why I think this works is Nami tends to be able to sit in the backline and not be killed. She has pretty reasonable defensive stats on her own, especially with that self-heal, so she doesn't really need the level 1 durability and can get away with scaling HP into later team fights. As far as glyphs are concerned, ability power followed up by MP5 are the best, and then a pretty big drop-off before magic resist and scaling magic resist. But flat AP is good on a lot of these. I don't know if I'm supposed to do damage or what supports. In a lot of these cases, you're not kind of casting your spells on cooldown. You're just casting them, once every wave or two for a trade, and that makes flat AP better. For non-tanks, generally speaking, CDR is unnecessary in support in some of these cases. As far as Quints are concerned, armor is the highest win rate. Move speed not far behind. Getting around lanes is quite nice. Ability power and gold also pretty close. Do, by the way, heavily recommend that you go Wind Speakers and not Thunderlords on Nami. The win rate is much higher on Wind Speakers. And in case you're unsure what you want to max, it's max W first, max E second. Q can stay at 1 point. It's fine. You don't need more points in the bubble really for a while. Morgana, again, another awkward option. Do I go damage or durability? Win rate is slightly higher with armor, but Magic Pen is not far behind. As far as seals are concerned, flat health followed by scaling health, not far behind either. Doesn't seem to need the armor very much. As far as glyphs are concerned, this is actually one where you do want cooldown reduction because, man, landing a bind and getting a black shield up a second time in a team fight is a really big deal. And so scaling CDR is pretty nice. Scaling MR and flat AP are close behind, but generally speaking, I think just getting binds and black shields up all the time is quite a bit better and quite a bit stronger. As far as Quints are concerned, move speed's actually a really big deal for her because getting into range for your ultimate or getting away because you don't have a lot of escape tools is really quite nice to do. Move speed Quints definitely, I think, underrated on this champion. You're going to see actually a lot of supports get quite a bit of value out of move speed Quints, being able to roam around and clear wars. There's a lot that supports do with move speed. They've got to recall more often than other champions to refill their sightstone to get new pink wards. They've got to roam around the map, and keep in mind, move speed is a really big gold and experience scaler, because the longer it takes you to clear a ward and get back, the more minions you missed out on that you didn't get XP or bandit gold or coin gold or whatever else on. And so move speed kind of feeds into everything else for supports, even on champions that aren't very obviously tanks. And of course, Morgana, yes, has some scales with move speed because of her ultimate and whatnot, but it's not that far apart. Now, as far as Masteries are concerned, actually, both Thunderlords and Colossus are very similar in win rate. Thunderlords, of course, triggers in the landing phase. You get some free damage out of that, and that's nice. You get to sometimes bully your opponents away. But Courage of the Colossus is really good on because, you know, you're going to land a bind in a team fight. You're going to land an ult in a team fight, and you're going to be frontlining. And if you want to not get one shot, Courage of the Colossus will help you not get one shot. It's a pretty big deal. That means you go 12-18-0 or 0-12-18 based on the champion, and you know, or based on the way you're playing the champion. But they're really very comparable. Blitzcrank, it's pretty close. Attack damage wins slightly more than armor does. Attack damage is obviously the more offensive version. Flat health by a long shot is the superior seal. Flat cooldown reduction is his highest win rate glyph. Although flat magic resist and scaling magic resist are right behind as well for some more tank stats, but you know, getting cooldowns is nice to throw out more hooks. Keep in mind Blitzcrank is still very, very mana limited, and it's very easy to run out of mana on that champion, so if you're spamming hooks out willy-nilly, you're in for a bad time. Finally, as far as quints are concerned, move speed is the more aggressive one and the higher win rate one, but flat armor is right behind it, and of course the more defensive. So this all looks very, very aggressive, but keep in mind there are defensive options that are just as good by running armor and stuff instead. Also worth pointing out for Blitzcrank is Courage of the Colossus is actually substantially higher win rate than Thunderlords. Even though we're seeing, ooh, run attack damage and CDR and move speed and all this stuff and try to pop this guy and trigger Thunderlords, you're still much better off just getting Courage of the Colossus and being a really big jerk in team fights, because you'll get really big shields and you're going to want to be able to frontline, and it's really nice to do. It's slightly worse in landing phase, but much better for the rest of the game. Karma is another, am I a support or a damage dealing kind of champion? And there's really a lot of options available. Precision, which is hybrid penetration, and armor and even just magic penetration are all very close in win rate, but hybrid pen does have the slight edge there. Flat health, scaling health tends to be the rune of choice here. They're both close together as well. If you're not in a very scary lane, like you're playing, I don't know, an Alistar lane in a sense, because they're not going to all in you, they're going to go for your 80 carry. You can sometimes get by pretty cleanly with scaling health seals, but you know, they don't win quite as often, so I would be a little bit afraid of doing that. As far as glyphs are concerned, flat AP seem to win the most, although there's a lot of competition. Scaling CDR, scaling MR, and flat MR are all close together. There's another champion where move speed tends to be her highest win rate rune, although flat AP and armor are close behind. She is definitely a win speakers user, 0, 18, 12. Do not go Thunderlords. You are wrong if you go Thunderlords. You should definitely max W last, and it's actually the win rate for Karma between Q max first and E max first are very close together. So there's not an objectively better setup, actually. I think it depends on the situation you're in. If you can poke someone out of lane, like push a Twitch or a Vayne out of lane, that's going to give you a lot of value into the mid game. But if it's a more equivalent lane, getting your shield maxed up by the time team fights happens is a really big deal. All right, move on to the next one. Next most common is Braum. Now, interestingly, I found this very surprising, but attack speed is actually a pretty big rune for Braum. I thought this was very strange, but the win rate is there. The thought is basically during a laning phase sort of 2-on-2 battle, the faster you trigger the stun, the better off you guys are, right? Q, auto, like the faster you get those in, it really does change quite a bit. So his actual highest win rate mark is attack speed, which was pretty insane. But it is followed closely behind by flat armor and flat attack damage. Flat attack damage, of course, for similar reasons to attack speed, is good for trading. Flat armor because you're tankier, not a big surprise here. Flat health and scaling health were pretty close together as far as seals are concerned, but flat HP is the really obvious always put in. And if you're, especially if you're at an economy for a number of rune pages, flat health is just always going to be good for you. It's never terrible and almost always exactly correct on supports in basically all situations. As far as glyphs are concerned, scaling magic resist tends to be really nice on him. You are going to be a frontline tank, and you know, it takes a few levels, like around level 8, I think, to break even with flat MR, but getting these stats are quite nice. And again, if you're a support in the bot lane, you're almost always not the one getting all in. You don't quite need the overall tank stats from the mages, because the mages can choose who they hit, and they're probably going to hit the 80k if they get the choice to. Karma is kind of wasting your damage going after a Braum in a lot of cases. So you can kind of get away with scaling there. But, you know, Even some MP5 to get more Qs out, some flat MR and some flat CDR are not far behind in win rate. They're all within 1%. And for a lot of these, the support rune choices are not making or breaking who wins the game. So don't fret too much about picking these up. Braum, flat armor user for pretty obvious reasons. Actually, weirdly enough, flat HP is pretty good on him as well. For some reason, we were seeing a lot of that rune in the statistics, but it's the only champion that he's really recommending flat HP, and I can't really recommend you buy flat HP just for this one guy. I think flat armor is great and close enough in win rate and applicable in more places that it's worth saving the IP. Brom is a Courage of the Colossus user. Triggering that stun is nice. Landing the ulti triggers it as well. Getting your passive to trigger. 0-12-18, no big shocks here. Okay, now on to Zyra, and Zyra is the first of the really aggro mages, and yes, that means magic penetration for the first time in this role is going to be the mark of choice, absolutely. And yes, oops, sorry, not scaling health, I misclicked that. Raw health is easily her best seal. It is actually fairly close with scaling health and armor, but not getting all-in by a Leona is a really big deal, so flat health is quite nice to have, and I think is substantially the best one to go for. It's worth pointing out, actually, that Magic Penetration is her winningest glyph. We don't see a lot of Magic Pen glyphs, really at all, but it is there as a viable option. It's worth noting that Scaling CDR is actually her second highest win rate glyph, which is substantially above flat AP or flat MR. I think if you're going flat MR and Zyra, you're outright wrong. But it's worth really noting that Magic Pen and Scaling CDR are actually her two best glyph types. And so, Scaling CDR just outright better than raw AP. But if you really want to win lane, Magic Pen is actually the best glyph for you. I think that's kind of interesting. And as far as quints are concerned, also Magic Pen is very good on her, which means, yes, your ideal page is 19.5 Magic Pen and 72 health. That is actually the best rune page you can do on Zyra, which means I need to update my own Zyra page because I was doing AP when in those places. And again, think about it. A lot of your damage is your plants, which scale with character level, Leandri's Torment, which scales with basically nothing else that you can do, and Thunderlord's Decree as well, which scales off nothing else you can do. And so you have all these points of damage that don't really scale nearly as hard off anything except Magic Pen, and end up being the right choice. But worth pointing out that other viable options, though much worse to be fair, are armor and ability power. It's also worth pointing out, by the way, that Thunderlords and Deathfire Touch are very close in win rate. So 18-12 and 12-18-0 are very similar win rate wise. Thunderlords is slightly stronger, but Deathfire Touch is very close behind. Also, for those who don't realize yet, you should be maxing E first on Zyra. You should be maxing E first on Zyra. I know a lot of people are surprised at this, but trust me, Grasping Roots is easily your best maxed ability by level 9. Yes, I wish to save the page. Let's make sure it updated. I'm pretty sure it did. Yes, okay, we're good. Wonderful. 11th most popular support is Soraka. Bet you never thought you'd see this. Her most winningest mark is flat ability power, which I know is strange, but actually AP is a really big deal for this champion so you can get efficient heals out. I didn't buy AP marks because it only affects one champion, so instead you can just run armor. Interesting to note, actually, that Magic Pen is the next winningest mark, because actually in a lot of her matchups, Soraka does pretty good damage. She's going to land a lot of Qs and play fairly aggressively, and can kind of withstand a lot of this. A properly played Soraka should not make her teammate 1v2. She should actually be in the fight a little bit. And you just have to play intelligently not to get one shot by Leona with Ignite or Alistar with Ignite. You have to be able to play smart enough to not die in these cases. But Magic Pen is actually not a terrible mark on Soraka, interesting to note, because, again, you will be landing quite a lot of Qs. As far as seals are concerned, this is the only champion in the game that really cares about scaling health per 5, and the win rate difference is very large. If you want to be a support main, or you really, really want to put a lot of games on Soraka, this is one of the specialty runes that's actually worth investing in, because it is much better on Soraka. I play support a lot, so I actually did go out and buy the rune. Otherwise, flat HP is okay, scaling HP is okay, and flat armor are okay, but they are not as good as scaling health regeneration. But you will only use that rune for that one champion, so kind of be sure if you're going to make that investment. As far as glyphs are concerned, flat AP is her best, although flat CDR is not far behind, nor is flat MR, nor is scaling MR. Basically, you're looking for either, better spells or more durability, which is no big surprise, and very few of them would be scaling in that case. As far as quints, interestingly enough, movement speed is actually her best quintessence, which I know is weird to a lot of us, but really is what's happening. She is good with that rune. HP 5 is second best for, I think, not unsurprising reasons. Flat armor and flat ability power also pretty close behind that one. Wind Speaker's Blessing. W into Q max is the best build for her, by the way, as far as my notes were concerned. So, of course, you max your heal, but then you max your Q right afterwards. And that's winning more games than anything else. Okay. Bard support, 12th most common. Hybrid Pen versus Armor are very close. Hybrid Pen technically wins a bit more, so that's what we're going to go for. Bard definitely can do some very good damage during team fights and during the landing phase, and so we put that in there. The meeps are very scary, and you land auto attacks to do meeps, so Hybrid. Flat HP wins more than scaling health, though both are pretty good. Health just wins more, and again, we're seeing more of this. Flat CDR, very, very good on Bard. His utility is important. It's very good. You can also run MR, scaling MR, even flat AP, but those are just a little bit better. Again, you're a support, you're roaming around the map. Move speed is very good. We're seeing this very commonly. It's quite popular, and it wins a lot, but also flat armor is the next best, not flat AP. You really need to be a bit more durable and stay alive in these fights to make the big plays, to line up for the double binds and whatnot. It's really important that you do that. His best build is 1812 with Thunderlords, and everyone's maxing Q, but you want to max E second, actually. That's a higher win rate than maxing the heals. You actually want to get Magical Journey up there. Number 13, Sona. Armor is actually her highest win rate mark, although it is followed very closely by Magic Pen and Hybrid Pen. If you find yourself in a laning phase where you can play aggressively without getting hooked, then feel free to switch, but those are better. Flat health by a lot is easily the best seal as the support goes. No really big surprises here. As far as glyphs are concerned, it's kind of interesting. She actually has a high win rate with scaling ability power. Sona tends to really hard if she goes CDR. So AP or magic resist tend to be the best runes for her. Scaling AP or raw AP is the best, and then there's a bit of a drop off, and then scaling MR or flat MR is best afterwards. What's also interesting is gold generation quints are actually her best quintessence. It's actually the highest win rate quint that she can get. Now, it's still pretty close to armor and raw ability power, so you don't have to shell out for just the gold quintessences, but this has been winning her more games. And the main reason is Sona really, really cares about getting those super sweet items like Ardent Sensor and Locket and all these other things, because she just needs... she just gets a lot out of Redemption and Ardent Sensor because it's so easy for her to apply all of her shields and whatnot, and getting these multipliers is a really big deal, so... those tend to be quite nice, and yeah, they're worth doing. Also worth pointing out that Sona's best keystone is definitely Wind Speaker's Blessing. I know some people would like to go Thunderlords and harass their opponents, but that only matters in the beginning of the laning phase. You are really much better served getting Wind Speakers and being much more useful, shielding your whole team and giving them all really big buffs. It is, trust me, much, much, much better. Moving on to Brand, and yes, Magic Pen is the best. Hybrid Pen is not far behind, but really you're going to land spells more than auto attacks, and Magic Pen does have the higher win rate. Flat HP is, yes, still the best seal. Scaling health not terribly far behind, but, flat HP is, of course, just better for the landing phase. What was interesting to note, actually, with the Brand runes is that scaling cooldown reduction, much like we saw with Zyra before when she was running Magic Pen, the second best was scaling CDR. Brand seems to really, really like scaling CDR, even though it's kind of hard to get these levels. The mage supports tend to level a little bit more because they can actually wave clear on their own, and that's not quite as bad for them. And they want to get their spells back up, and Brand can get a second Qs in there and whatnot, and these spells are really high impact, and so actually gets quite a lot of value off of scaling CDR, but scaling magic resist, flat AP, flat MR, not terribly far behind. They can be good as well. But as far as quints are concerned, Magic Pen is definitely great. It is great to do. It's worth noting that if you're willing to do Magic Pen quints, you should not be doing ability power glyphs. You should definitely switch them out for for Magic Pen glyphs if you're going to do it, which then makes it the Zyra rune page, of course. Magic Pen, movement speed, and then maybe even ability power can be good on Brand. Move speed is actually a very good brand glyph, or a brand quintessence, and I think is actually probably the best quint to do in mid lane Brand, because again, you're very much movement speed locked, and that's very important for you to get that stuff to go right. But that's kind of what's on there. And by the way, worth pointing out, Deathfire Touch, easily the best keystone for him, 18-12-0, and W into Q max is definitely awesome there. Finally, we go with Nautilus, the 15th most common support. Interestingly, win rates told us that attack speed were very good marks. Don't love it, to be honest, but it is up there as well. I'm going to land auto attacks. I'm going to be ignored during team fights. Basically, the way this works is when you get into 2-on-2s in the bot lane, the way bot lane works, when you get into 2-on-2s, especially if your support is a tank support, you are not allowed to all in the tank support because you can't kill him. By the time you kill the tank support, they have already killed your AD carry or your range support. It has happened. And so when you play a champion like Nautilus, you know they're going to go for your AD carry and ignore you. And the more attack speed you get, the more damage you actually deal in these fights. And it actually helps your 2-on-2. Getting attack speed on tanks helps your 2-on-2 quite a bit. It helps Braum. It helps Nautilus. The win rate is there. It also helps you get your auto attack out a little bit faster in case you're worried about missing a last hit with the Relic Shield. The more attack speed you have, the faster the auto comes out, the less chance you have of missing a cannon, and that can be nice as well. As far as seals are concerned, yep, flat health, still amazing. Scaling health, not far behind. As far as glyphs are concerned, flat magic resist because we are a tank, that's important, but CDR and scaling MR, not far behind either, so these are all kind of viable options, to be honest. And yes, it's 1.34 MR per glyph. And then as far as quints are concerned, he's actually not as much of a move speed user. And the primary reason for that is he's not really using his body nearly as much as the other champions, right? He's using his ultimate at his point and clicking something from across the team fight. He's using his Q, which doesn't need a ton of move speed for in the first place. And it just doesn't seem to be as important for him. Of course, he's a Courage the Colossus user, 0-12-18, no big surprises there, but these are actually sort of win rate rise, the best runes for Nautilus. Feel free to sub out attack speed for armor if you feel like you want to be a bit more, bit more durable.